join us, but we want to be faithful to your time and also honor Lori's time. We are certainly fortunate to have today with us Dr. Lori Ferguson. She is a coach, a consultant, a psychologist. She served as a parish pastor for over 20 years before returning to school and obtaining her doctorate in psychology. She specializes in helping people and organizations grow resiliency skills. She is a consultant with judicatories that want to develop a vision and a plan for going forward with faithful courage. I've known Lori for several years now. I greatly respect her work and her wisdom in guiding church leaders. Today, we are so fortunate to have her to be a part of our Transformation Going Beyond Change initiative here in Minnesota Valley's Presbytery. Would you help me in welcoming Dr. Lori Ferguson this morning? And Lori, we thank you, and I will turn everything over to you at this time.
Right. Thanks. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I've known Sandana and respect and admire her leadership. And I think this initiative that you all are engaged in is not only timely, but imperative. And it speaks to your wisdom and being led by the Spirit that you're moving in that direction. It would help me as we get started if we could just go quickly around the room and just have everybody go ahead as you go through and unmute yourself. Just tell me your name and the name of your congregation or the name of where you are in your ministry setting, just so everybody gets their voice into the room quickly, and then I'll open us with prayer.
Well, I'm Mark Ford. I am the moderator of the Presbytery right now. I serve a church called Lakes Area Presbyterian Church, which is based in Brainerd, Baxter, which is in the central part of Minnesota.
I'm Bob Bartlett. I'm pastor of two congregations here in the southwest corner of our presbytery, Round Lake and Brewster.
I am
Marcia, you're muted, so we're missing this if you're speaking.
How's that? Better?
That's better, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm Marcia Sylvester, and I serve Harrison Community Presbyterian Church and Zion Lutheran Church, both two open country parishes.
And I'm Michael Hartwell. I serve Randall Presbyterian Church.
I'm Bonnie.
Go ahead.
I'm Bonnie Royce. I'm at Wyndham Presbyterian Church in South Central.
I'm Kathy Knaps. I'm a ruling elder at Lismore Presbyterian Church in the southwest part of the state.
I'm Andy Davis. I'm pastor in St. Peter, Minnesota, which is kind of the eastern edge of the Presbytery.
I'm Richard Lawrence, ruling elder of First Presbyterian Church in St. Cloud, and I do pulpit supply in a number of small churches in the area.
And I'm Murphy Ashley, pastor at Silver Lake.
Just have a couple more if you jump in and just introduce yourselves, that'd be great.
I'm Darren Seaman from St. Cloud, Minnesota.
Thanks, Darren.
I'm Eunice Woodbury from Jackson, Minnesota.
And Candace, I know you're here and I see you're muted, so we welcome you as well. So let's just take a moment and sort of center ourselves and open to the Spirit as we begin this conversation together. Holy loving one, you know that we come this morning from many places, from different experiences. Our minds and our hearts have been full And now as we come together in this community to consider how you might have us continue to grow and develop, we ask for the presence of your Spirit among us, that even over the miles, we would be open to what you have for us to learn and how we might put that into practice, that our leadership might be in deep and faithful service to you and your vision, that your reign might come in all its fullness. We pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen. So as Sandana said, I work with a lot of church leaders, and we are aware in this time in which we are working to provide faithful leadership and service to congregations, there are many, many things that pull on us. And one of the things that seems to come up over and over again is sort of how can we sort of stay upright in a sense and stay attuned to the Spirit and able to do and bring our best work. And so some of what I have been involved in is translating some of the learnings that come from sort of secular psychology and organizational thought and translating it into our work as church and faith leaders. And I'm going to talk today about a component of resilience, which is resonance. And those of you who read the sort of write-up of what we were going to talk about know that this comes from the work of a professor named Boyatzis. So I'm going to put up my slides, and so we'll be sharing the screen. Oh, I apologize, Candace. I just see your note. And that is that you are Leah. So welcome, and I'm putting my volume up. Does that help, Sandana? Okay, great. So I'm going to share the screen now for some slides. And Sandana, again, I'm going to ask you to help us. Now, why? Can you all see the slides? Are you there?
Yep.
Okay, great. Great. Okay, so resilience is often talked about as if it's a monolithic thing, but actually resilience is composed of our habits, our beliefs, our attitudes, and our actions. So there's a lot of things that go into resilience. One of the primary threads that I think about in sort of that resilience palette is this characteristic called resonance or resonant leadership. And it was developed by a professor at Case Western in Ohio called, his name is Richard Boyatzis. And so he begins to talk about resonance as a quality of leadership that can really make a difference for us and really help us develop our resilience. I'm going to just show you a quick video that talks about why resonance matters.
Let's start with the question. Out of all the things in the world that would help an organization, school district included, be more resilient, why would we want to focus on respect? What do you think? There's a lot of reasons why respect is important. Some people think, well, we're happier when in a respectful organization. But I'm going to kind of dive immediately into the scientific notion. How many of you are familiar with the subject of emotional intelligence? A lot of the work for this subject was done locally here by Richard Boyatzis in collaboration with a fellow named Daniel Goleman out of the University of Chicago. And in one of his most recent books, Primal Leadership, Daniel Goleman refers to human beings as being open loop systems. Open loop systems. Now, in order to understand an open loop system, you first have to understand what a closed loop system is. And in a very simple fashion, let's think of a closed loop system being your washing machine at home. Once you have the clothes picked out, you put them in, you select the right detergent and whatever boosters you put in there with it, the right water temperature and the right cycle. Once you hit the start button, what do? What's required of you? Nothing. You can go over to the dryer and fold clothes. You can go into the kitchen and have a cup of coffee. You can do whatever you want. The washing machine just does its own thing. Human beings, as it turns out, are wired very, very differently. Actually, we evolved to not only be open, but to require input from outside of ourselves. Now, why do you think our species was so well served by being open loop systems? What did that actually prepare us for that our forefathers found very, very helpful. Survival, right? Simply survival. When one tribe was walking across the plains of Georgia, the savannas of Africa, and met up with another tribe, we very quickly had to determine whether they were what? Friend or foe. And failure to do that could mean dire consequences, right? So think of our brains as being these, at least a part of them, as having these incredible radar antenna. How many of you are old enough to remember the original Lost in Space? Not the one with Matt LeBlanc. In the original Lost in Space series, there was this character, the evil Dr. Smith, right? And whenever the doctor was about to embark on some diabolical scheme to get the Space Family Robinson in trouble, what would Robot say?
Danger,
danger, warning, warning, danger, Will Robinson, right? So think of our brains as having that very same capacity. Whenever we meet somebody or are reacquainted to somebody, our brains are immediately going on to alert mode to tell us, to make a snap decision, is that person friendly or not? And that sets the stage for the entire rest of the relationship. We do this collectively in our communities too. So whenever you are in the presence of other people, they are monitoring you, you are monitoring them. You can't turn it off. It's always in the on position. Now, why is this important? It's important because of what happens in the rest of the brain depending on that assessment. If my assessment of Mike or Chris or anybody else in here is that I need to be cautious around you, there's a part of my brain that sits right behind the forehead called the prefrontal cortex. And the rest of my brain kind of goes into hibernation, including the prefrontal cortex, while I prepare myself to be safe or to protect myself. The prefrontal cortex only does menial things like creative problem solving, decision making, all the great things that we need the brain to do from our students and from our staff. Those things go on hibernation whenever I feel I'm in an unsafe environment. So to the degree that we, as individuals, as part of the collective, can communicate to other people, you're safe with me, you're friendly, I'm friendly. What we're doing is we're actually freeing up all of our brains to do their very best work. Do you think this applies to students as well? Absolutely, 100%.
So what he's talking about here that is relevant to us is this idea that we are all wired to be open loop systems, and that we are always trying to determine if in fact I'm safe, and that is our baseline. Is this a safe place for me? Is this a safe meeting to be in? Is worship a safe space? Am I safe with you as my pastor? And what I want us to take forth from this, as we begin to talk more about resonance, is the reality that we catch emotions, and we catch them below the level of our thinking mind. We have already caught them in our sort of nervous system and body energy. Before we can even think about it, we've caught it. And so a leader's stress and a leader's negative emotions are contagious. And so are your positive emotions. If you are able to bring a resonant, positive energy into a situation, that's also going to be contagious. Now, the other thing I want to say about open loop systems that we'll keep coming back to is, of course, they go both ways. That means you are catching them as well. If you're coming into a difficult session meeting and you know people are already primed to be upset, you may catch their emotions, or you may be having what you think is a perfectly good conversation and something comes from somebody else's emotion that you catch it. So it goes both ways. But the reality is, as the leaders, yours actually are going to be more powerful. So how you show up matters for you and for them. And we are communicating this in our tone, in our body language, in our facial expressions, and in our word choice. All of that communicates very, it's really at the speed of light. It's really beyond, our thinking is slow compared to this. And our bodies and the bodies of those with us are going to respond because the limbic system is reading it. So one of the ways that Boyatzis talks about it is that emotion is the carrier wave of leadership. Your leadership, as you seek to do this transformation beyond change, is going to be deeply affected by the kind of emotion that you bring to it. And that is going to be more important, or it's going to be the way in which the information, the stories that you tell come to your people. So Boyatzis talks about having positive emotional attractors, meaning in our systems and in our communities that will lead to being resonant. So we want to be resonant as leaders. We also want to have resonant leadership bodies with us, and that the strong and positive emotional attractors are hope and compassion. Those are two of our strongest. And he talks about hope as the umbrella magnet attractor, meaning when you are hopeful, that is really kind of the most powerful positive emotional attractor you can put into a situation, into a relationship, into a congregation, into a team you're working with. That when you bring that hopefulness, it shifts everything. But there are also other positive magnet attractors, and that's compassion, being compassionate, generous, calm, joyful, happy, at ease, amused, optimistic, when you're inspired, when you're creative. Those are all positive emotional attractors. And can any of you think of any other positive emotional attractors that I haven't even named, but that really has some meaning or some power for you? You think about for yourself, what are some of, when you really begin to sort of have a sense of that positivity for yourself? Any different words that you could offer the group? I'm also noticing that a lot of you are writing things down, which is great because that's a great way to remember to write it down. But I also have these slides on a handout that I will send to Sandana afterwards, so you will also be able to reinforce by having that. So as there are positive emotional attractors, there are also negative emotional attractors. And these are some of the most powerful ones that can move through a leader. Again, you may be saying things that are positive, but what's really going on in that open loop system for you may be more negative at times. So this leads to dissonance. And some of the ones he identifies are resentment, worry, cynicism, and I think probably the umbrella negative emotional attractor is fear. I think fear can move through a person, a group, a situation more quickly than almost anything. So if you were having a meeting and you think it's going well, and then somebody brings up something fearful. Well, remember when we did this last time and 3 people left the congregation, that fear will move through the group and begin to sort of shift everybody into dissonance, which again, as he said, begins to shut down. People stop feeling safe and feeling able to contribute. So other negative emotional attractors, and we all have them, but it's a question of what our go-to is when we get defensive. Sometimes if we begin to feel greedy or angry, when we get frustrated, certainly when we're in despair or when we feel like we're going to blame somebody, all of those negative emotional attractors will begin to set up dissonance for ourselves in our leadership and in our congregations. And certainly when we're talking about change, when we're talking about doing things differently, when people begin to feel a little destabilized, it's a time when these negative emotional attractors can really come in, that sort of dissonance that can move through a group or situation. Any responses or questions at this point? Anything anybody wants to wonder about or get clarified?
Yeah, this is Mark. I was just kind of curious though, and maybe you'll talk about this later, but I mean, sometimes frustration can move us forward maybe a little bit, or, if we're frustrated, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, I'm just trying to articulate out loud. If we're frustrated with our group, then maybe that challenges us to think about doing something in a new way. So, I mean, it's possible that some frustration may be helpful.
I think that's a really great point. And what I'm hearing you sort of use is that sometimes that frustration or that feeling stuck really begins to be leverage in order to do something different. You know, we don't know we have to do it until we get frustrated or we feel struck. So I think that's a great point. I think what he's talking more about is if this begins to be a characteristic of the way the community operates. Does that make sense to put it that way? But I think that you've raised a really good point. Sometimes these negative emotional attractors do motivate us. I think it's when we stay in that. Yeah. Anybody else? So the other thing that he describes that I find really relevant as I work with pastors and faith leaders is, and certainly with sessions and adjudicatories, is that we are in a time when most leaders are experiencing what he calls chronic power stress. And he defines this in a couple ways. That there is some unrelenting responsibility, a sense that I'm responsible day and night for how this is going. And people are always looking to me, and I feel that responsibility. That there's ongoing crisis management, that a crisis will come from here, it'll come from there. You know, I didn't expect it, and I'm constantly managing these different crises, whether they're personal or with others. And then this one that I think we often don't factor into what contributes to that kind of sense of stress, but that we are always engaging with others, and particularly as pastors, and faith leaders, we need a great deal of self-control as we begin to engage and sort of help manage individuals who are going through their own sense of crisis or their own question, or, you know, to Mark's point, their own frustration, and that always takes emotional energy. And so we are spending emotional energy a lot. And there's a lot of pressure to make the right decision. There's a lot of sense of, you know, I've got to get this right. You know, we have a limited time window, or we have limited money, or we have limited volunteer resources. We need to make the right decision. So all of that comes together to contribute to what he calls chronic power stress. And he's calling it power because you are sort of all in the pivot point of that responsibility, of that leadership from where you sit. And so that begins to be overwhelming. And it leads to what he calls the sacrifice syndrome. So leadership is exciting, it's stressful, and it's lonely. It is often lonely. There's nobody that sits in your chair, stands in your shoes, that really kind of gets the whole picture in the way you do. There is a kind of a requirement, and most of us, when we are in church leadership, we understand that our role is to give and give and give, but often without renewal. And so that can lead to a sense of internal disquiet or unrest or distress that maybe we don't even acknowledge to ourselves that is going on. And so that dissonance, that kind of energy that's a little bit off and that isn't sort of opening as a positive, begins to be the default for where we are. So he looks at it this way. There's that kind of stress, that unrelenting responsibility, that emotional management that leads to a sort of a pattern of sacrifice, which is that giving and not getting renewal, and that can lead in our own leadership to dissonance rather than resonance. Any comments or questions or thoughts about that?
Lori, this is Sandana. I'm wondering if we can ask you to cut the volume up a little bit more. We're still having some difficulty, at least in the Presbytery office, in hearing.
Oh,
Thank
I apologize. I'll try to speak louder. My volume is up as high as it'll go,
Okay.
but I will try to speak louder. Thanks.
Thank you.
So resonant leadership is the ability to be a leader with a powerful, positive belief in the organization and its people. And I really lean into Jeremiah from this. because this phrase from Jeremiah, for surely I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans for welfare and not for harm, to give you a future with hope, which seems to me to be the key for resident leadership, that if we as the leaders can lean into that space of feeling that we have a future with hope in our congregations, in our ministries, that is going to, by definition, create resonance in our congregations and in ourselves as leaders, because you know that God loves and treasures you as much as your congregation. And so your resonance really matters in terms of your sense of hopefulness for yourself. So one of the things that I have found very compelling about Dr. Boyatz's view is that renewal of resonance does not happen just by rest and relaxation. Sometimes we think, well, if I just get a day off, if I just get away from work, if I'm able to get away from my email for a while or the texts on my phone and just get some rest, get a vacation, get a down day, I'm going to come back, ready to go. He's very clear that renewal does not occur simply by getting that kind of relaxation. What really renews us is to arouse our limbic system in a new way, that we need a different kind of input into that open loop, and that what really feeds us is an experience of hope, an experience of compassion, of mindful attention to ourself and others, and playfulness. That those are his 4 pieces that really build resonance and help us move into that space of offering that positive emotional attractor. The first one is, how do we for ourselves build an experience of hope? The second thing is mindfulness, and by that he doesn't mean, having to meditate, but he means being able to be aware and in the present moment and aware of what's around us. Most of us are preoccupied 90 to 95% of the day with our thoughts, with what's coming next, or, that phone call I just got, or what I need to be thinking about for Sunday's sermon, or that thing I haven't done yet. We're always just like this, and most of us are not even aware of our situation or where we are. So just take a moment, and we'll practice mindfulness for 10 seconds here. Just take a moment, look up from your computer screen, notice your surroundings, notice where you are, if you have a window near you, so much the better, but if not, something that holds your attention in a loving way in the space where you are, just take a moment and look up, and then take another moment after you've looked and really felt your surroundings and check in with your body. Just kind of go inside for a minute and notice your body. Are you tense in any place in your body? Are you noticing that you might need to just sort of shift a little bit, or loosen your shoulders, or loosen your jaw? Are you breathing well? So that's that kind of mindfulness and just checking in with yourself. So that's what he means by mindfulness, an awareness of where we are, what's going on with ourselves, that all of us right now, in whatever way, are okay. And we wouldn't be sitting here on this call if things weren't in some way okay with us. The third thing he talks about is the experience of compassion. And it's first compassion for ourselves, which I think is really rooted and in our own spiritual practice of knowing how much God's compassion is extended to us, how much God understands who we are, our limitations, as well as our gifts and call, the compassion and love God has for us that we begin to feel, and that when we can be in that space, we can begin to also then be compassionate with those around us. And finally, as Presbyterians, this is not necessarily our birthright, but that what also builds our resonance is the compassion, is the practice of playfulness. What is it for you to be playful? What is it that awakens that playfulness in you? Is it, for some people I've noticed that something comes into their lives when they have grandchildren. All of us are not in that demographic or don't necessarily have that, but if you're around young children, that can help. But some folks I know are naturally playful. They have things they go to that really awaken that spirit in them. and that playfulness also builds our resonance. So these are the 4 practices that, as he says, arouse our limbic system out of its usual, for some of us it's a usual hypervigilance of, what fresh hell is this? What's going to happen next? And to awaken us into another direction, which is this resonant direction. So that's a big central piece of building resonance. So I'd be interested in your reactions or your questions or your thoughts.
Well, this is Mark again. Hope to me seems to be the hardest one to cultivate. I mean, because I think we've all experienced times when we have been hurt and so we look back and say, well, is there really much hope that things are going to get better? I mean, that's our belief and our faith, but I don't know, some days I have a hard time having that hope. So I'm just not sure how to generate hope.
Thank you, Mark. You're a lead into my next piece, because I do think hope is is really, in some ways, which seems sort of ironic as faith leaders, that's the most challenging one. But I think we're surrounded. It's not just our own personal hopefulness. We're surrounded by, congregations that feel like their pews are too empty. We're in a denomination that's sort of like, who are we and where are we? We live in culture where, in many ways there's a sense of where is our hope. So I think I agree with you. I think this is the most challenging. So hopefulness is, as he describes it, a state accompanied by clear thoughts about what the future can be and how to get there. That's his definition of hopefulness. And I think that really connects with that passage in Jeremiah, but I also think it connects with the gospel. Clear thoughts about what the future can be and how to get there. And that for a leader to be able to bring hopefulness into the congregation, into the community, you need to see the future as feasible and realistic. So hopefulness really is not about, it's how do you understand the reign of God coming where you are? What's feasible and realistic in your experience? And I think of hopeful leaders as that one of the things we can do is reawaken in ourselves to be professional dreamers. Dreamers for what is the dream that God is dreaming for us and our people? Have dreams and aspirations that help us form an image of the desired future. Like where do we want to be? It may not be exactly like it looked like in the past. In fact, it probably won't be. But what would be our desired future that's feasible and realistic where we are? So again, I think sometimes we get caught in a fantasy of a future. Well, if we just do this or this, it'll be like it was in the past. Part of what you're talking about is beyond change to transformation, is to realize transformation means it's not going to look like it did in the past. There are things we have to let go of, but there is a possibility that God has for us. God has not abandoned us. And so how can we dream? And who are the folks that you can gather around you to dream with you, who would hold that hopefulness and that dreaming? The possibility of being optimistic, and to the degree that you can really lean into your ability to make change, where you've done it before, and have a sense you can do it again. And again, back to that sense of that desired future as reasonable and feasible, realistic, feasible. Given who we are and where we are at this moment, what's realistic and feasible? So one of the things that helps me are quotes from other people. And, when I think about dreaming, sometimes that feels like, oh, again, I'm going to go into this large fantasy thing. And this passage from Howard Thurman, many of you may know, is just a powerful pastor and writer and poet. This particular quote really helps me. And what I'd like us to do is just go around the circle and read it aloud. And everybody just read one sentence and then somebody else pick it up. And so just whenever you're ready to read, just read that sentence, and we will read it aloud together. And I'll start with the first one and then somebody pick up the second one, and so on. As long as we hold a dream in the heart, we cannot lose the significance of living.
The dream in the heart is one of the living water welling up from the very spring of being, nourishing and sustaining all of life.
The dream need not be some overwhelming plan. It need not be a dramatic picture of what must be someday. It is not in these grand ways that the dream nourishes life.
The dream is the quiet persistence in the heart that enables us to ride out the storms of our churning experiences. It is the exciting whisper moving through the aisles of the spirit, answering the monotony of limitless days of dull routine. Next person, please.
It is the ever-recurring melody in the midst of the broken harmonies of human conflict.
It is the touch of significance which highlights the ordinary experience, the common event.
The dream is no outward thing. It lives in the inward part. It is deep within, where the issues of life and death are ultimately determined.
Keep alive the dream, for as long as we hold a dream in the heart, we cannot lose the significance of living.
So when we think about cultivating hopefulness, when we think about being called to be professional dreamers as a part of building that resonance for ourselves, it is that dream in the heart. And I do think it begins, if you think about being a resonant leader, it really begins with each of you first, you know, having the time and space to really come back to what is the dream in your heart. You know, where is that significance of living for you? You know, sometimes different people I work with come back to their own sense of call. Sometimes they have a personal dream that really speaks to them. And as long as they are attending that dream, they are able to be leaders to help a congregation come in touch with their dream. But it is that the power of that dream is what really fuels the hope, which is that umbrella attractor. So I'm wondering if how this lands with you all as you begin to think about this.
Well, this is Mark again. I think sometimes that having that dream is also one of the things that to me leads to frustration, because I maybe don't know well enough how to move the dream along to make it a reality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I often think about dreams, and sometimes with dreams, you don't have the full picture. And it's hard sometimes to be able to see how things will ultimately come out. And so with dreams, for me, at least it has been having enough of a vision of what can be, and then just knowing in faith that these other parts will come into place, and maybe things will become a lot clearer day by day.
Along with that, I always think of dreams as something that evolves. We always say dream big, but sometimes I think it's more hopeful to dream little, and you can see the progress that's being made much more easily. You know, so kind of a dream within a dream, or
Yes, absolutely. And that's where I love this piece from Dr. Thurman, that the dream need not be some overwhelming plan or a dramatic picture of what must be. It's actually can be a much smaller kind of, you know, I think I've got the still small voice, you know, how we can sometimes experience God in a moment. in a touch of something that's like, oh, that comes in, and then it moves from there. Yeah.
And then Leah shared on the chat that she says, I love this actually. I just visited with a church that is a blend of two congregations. One just closed their church. The other is adjusting to 35 new members, looking for hope in a new dream. I will share this with them.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think sometimes it's hard to get others to buy into your dream or to come together with you on your dream.
And so what do you do then?
I guess I just try to keep talking about it.
Yeah. Any other strategies that some of you have if you feel people aren't coming along with your dream?
I mean, I think part of our privilege as church leaders is that we get to, I mean, I think it takes repetition. So I think keeping the talk about it is actually a really good tactic, and coming back to it again and again and again, and you know, in preaching and worship and all that we do, we should be articulating some sort of vision, some sort of dream for what the church can be like, for what society can be like, and that should motivate all that we do. And it can take years and years of persistence before people start to understand, or even we understand what we're trying to get at, I think.
And Andy, I agree with you that this dream can also, the language, cast a vision. We are vision casters as well. And I think it becomes important that we leave ourselves as dreamers, as vision casters, open to the Holy Spirit, that our dreams might change because of the congregation. They may add to it, it may just stimulate their own dreams for themselves and where God is leading. So I really like the word dream. It's a really good one, I think, for the people in the congregation. But sometimes my dreams are not necessarily the dreams the congregation needs.
That's very well said, Marcia. Thank you. I think that how God weaves together, you know, the dreams of the people, you know, you all are the leaders, but you're right. They may have dreams that expanded or shifted, and how do you join to dream together? Yeah. So I want to spend a minute talking about this question that, you know, Mark kind of raised for us, but I think is really if we're going to be practicing resonance, and that hope is the main piece of that. Really, the questions are before us about how we create those hopeful habits. You know, Andy's right. It sometimes takes years and repetition, and we can kind of lose hope or kind of feel like, really, I'm going to say this again. How can I be hopeful? Because nothing seems to change. And yet I believe that really is the call of our leadership. So the first question is, as you think about it, what biblical and spiritual resources sustain and nurture your hope? You know, when you think for yourselves, what is it biblically, spiritually, what practices sustain and nurture your hope? We're small enough that I don't think I have to put everybody in rooms to have one-on-one or two-on-two discussion, but would somebody just, and with that, this second question, what practices do I engage in regularly that feed hope? I think we have to attend to this, not just expect it to happen to us. So for you, what would be the practices or the resources that you know you could turn to or do turn to?
Well, this is Darren. One of the practices that I engage in that helps me is silence. I know that when we're in a busy world and when our culture is loud, I have to practice silence, and, well, of course, all the biblical resources as well, but silence really helps me in my understanding of faith, and it does feed my hope.
Well, this is not really a spiritual or biblical resource, but I found that I've got to engage in things that are not church connected. And so I do community theater, and that really gives me a chance to interact with a lot of people that may not be in church. And that probably is one of the things that gives me more hope than other things. Is just that the world keeps turning and revolving, and I can I don't know. I guess I'm just strengthened by that engagement with people who are not from the faithful or the Christian backgrounds or whatever. But I guess it just gives me hope for whatever reason.
That's great, Mark. I would also hunch that it's great sort of to be off task in a sense. You don't have to be the leader there in the same way. And I would also bet it, just watching your face even from this distance, that it also helps your sense of playfulness about life, which I also think feeds hope. Yeah, thank you. Others?
To me, I just think letting passages of scriptures that I've memorized over time go through my mind just kind of gives a new perspective on things. And the best way to do that is riding my bike, because it's a good reminder that the scriptures are always having us in motion in life, and directional motion. It's not just motion for motion's sake. It's scriptures remind us where we're going.
Leah has also written getting out in nature, and prayer walking is something that helps to give her hope. Often when I'm looking for biblical hope, I continue to read the book of Nehemiah, because I think that he is a magnificent change agent.
I think it's helpful to read any of the leaders and notice the stress and the frustration that they went through, and realize that it's not just me that's frustrated with my people, but Moses did, and Isaiah did, and Jeremiah did.
I find Mark Ford knows this. I find reading, especially nonfiction, to be hopeful. And I enjoy articles. In fact, yesterday I was reading an article called "Building an Equal Society" by one of my new favorite philosophers named Elizabeth Anderson, and she's just so intelligent, and she's so sharp in her thinking and so clear in her writing. And I agree so much with her ethics and where she wants us all to go is in the world today. That just knowing that there are people out there, oh, I'm muted, aren't I? No, I'm not. There are people out there like her who are working, it's hopeful to me. You know what I mean? It's not just me and my little church or us and a little presbytery, but there's a whole world of people who are trying to create a better, more equal, more flourishing society.
So that's a beautiful thing, because it reminds us, what do we do as a community of faith? I mean, part of it is to know it's not all up to us. We're all joining hands and sort of knit together with others who are doing that. Thank you. That's lovely.
I've been doing a lot of work with Bowen's family systems theory, and then a lot of reading leadership stuff. And I think both of those venues have helped me see the world differently and react differently to people.
So one of the things I hear here is that we're creating this beautiful buffet of these practices, and that as different people, it's not just one thing that feeds hope. There's what is a balanced meal, and then to also think for our congregations and the people we work with, what are the many different ways that hope might be cultivated there? Some of it is through what we do in worship, and some of it, but there may be many other ways that our congregations, our communities can begin to feel and experience their hope. And how can we offer all those different practices? What do we do as a community of faith to hold a dream and nourish hope? So if you think about the people that you're leading, What's the best diet for them, or what's the variety of nutrients that they could have? So finally, I want to ask you to think about your own residence inventory, and some of this really relates to what we were talking about in terms of hope. What are your positive emotional attractors? What do you know that sort of wakes you up and helps you feel alive and open to the way the Spirit wants to move you? Marcia's phrase about moving forward, absolutely. And how are you best restored to hope? How are you best restored to compassion and mindfulness and playfulness? Where are those things that really restore you in that way? And just for yourself to become aware, this is part of that mindful. For you, as you think about it, what are the signs that you are slipping into dissonance? And to know that we all go in and out of this many times a day. But sometimes we can get ourselves, we've got a time of life, maybe external circumstances or a certain way, or we've, taken in too much news, or, something has happened where dissonance begins to be more the daily experience that we're having. What are the signs for you that you're slipping into dissonance and that you might want to work towards more resonance? Anybody, as I say that, anybody have a thought about when they are slipping into dissonance?
Yeah, I have two thoughts. One being that I can tell I'm just more curt with people, more sharp in a negative way with people. But also, I think I've noticed that if I'm stressed or if I'm not doing my best, that I can slip into a kind of mechanical way of thinking about problems. And I think sometimes members of the church kind of want that from us. Like if there's a conflict in the congregation, people will, ruling elders will come forward and say, what does the manual of operations or what does the book of order say about how we should manage this issue? And people are not complying with their rules and such, and in some ways we're sort of forced to go to the rules and to go to the mechanics of the organization. But that really, I think in the long run, that doesn't really help the situation a whole lot. I mean, it's good to have good processes and good rules, but it's better to kind of get out of that mechanical way of thinking into a more hopeful, calm way of thinking. So it's, trying to be a good Presbyterian at the same time being a more hopeful, sort of, relaxed kind of person too.
Wow, that I had not thought of that. That really, what's going through my mind is, when we get into that mechanical, more routinized, it's drier, and it's more rigid. All of that feels like that's sliding into dissonance, as opposed to being more flexible, more juicy, more open. I think that really is what the fruits of the Spirit are about. So that's a really nice kind of polarity there. Yeah. So if we're getting too tired, if I think it was Darren who said, if we aren't getting enough quiet time or time alone, if we are, always stimulated and bombarded, those kinds of things can lead us into that more. Other observations?
When I'm slipping into dissonance, I tend to stay stuck at my desk working on planning and all of that. And I found the best thing for me to do, it doesn't have to be a shut-in. It could just be to call up about 3 people and in 2 weeks, go do some home visits. That total change in perspective helps get me out of my funk.
That's a really nice. So shifting, not just shifting yourself physically. I mean, sometimes people say, I go for a walk, but you really engage with some people. Again, you get that, you do that output, input. That's beautiful. One of my signs that I'm slipping into dissonance is when I start to think, why bother? Why bother? It's not going to be any different. Why bother? Make that effort. Why bother? And to recognize that's a kind of an emotional or mental rut that I go into, and how do I sort of quiet and allow some other, and I think that idea of shifting into a different experience can help with that. Get some input from other people, you know, a trusted other who kind of helps ground me. I'm gonna go out of the share if I can figure. Oh, I know how I do it. There we go. And come back. Stop share. Now we're all back together. So this was my, this is what I had to offer today in terms of this building resonance, which is that component of resilience that comes into our sort of toolkit and practices as you are indeed moving beyond change to really want to lead transformation. I want to just identify that there are 3 key takeaways that I hope you take. And the first is to just recognize this really is a time of chronic power stress for you all. And in some ways, there's a lot of stress that I know you experience in your congregations, but I'm really talking to you and about you. So to notice that, how much energy all this takes. And that the way to build resonance is not just rest and relaxation. I mean, I think that's kind of the habit in our minds. Well, if I just get a day off or just get away, or, you know, when I look forward to vacation, that's what's going to do it. But to build resonance, we move and attend to our emotional attractors. And the 4 were hope and compassion, that mindfulness, that kind of coming into the moment and being aware of ourselves, kind of stepping out of that ongoing stream in our heads, and playfulness. And that hope is the most powerful emotional attractor. And because of that open loop system and because of your position as leaders, it really is the most powerful one that is contagious. So that as you bring that hopefulness in, and whatever feeds that and sustains that in you is what will really create that. So I'm open to any questions or comments or follow-up that you all might offer at this point.
I was curious, you didn't really talk much about compassion, and that is that towards other people or compassion for ourselves? And now that I'm thinking about it, maybe you didn't mention that, but is that what compassion means?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So that, and I find that really helpful, that compassion actually also renews our resonance. And it may be, you know, it may be that it's an antidote to some of that mechanical thinking. And that is that when we awaken our hearts is how I think of it. If we can awaken our hearts and hold first of all ourselves as God holds us, you know, to remember and be in that prayerful time or whatever it is that really renews that sense in you, that experience of God's deep love and grace for you first. And I think we tend to sort of feel like we have to give that, and often we do not take the time to receive that. And that, you know, getting our own roots really watered with compassion, and to know God has compassion on our calendars, on our email streams, on our hopes and dreams, you know, on what's going on for us in every aspect of life, on our health. All of that God is holding and loving. And then we can move towards being in our hearts as we think about our situations, our people. But compassion will renew that sense of resonance for us. Yeah, thanks for going back to that. Anybody else? Any other questions or comments or thoughts? Because it also helps all of our learning. You know, you all have really opened up and made it more lively and real.
Lori, this is Sandana. I'm thinking about the loss that's associated with change. And sometimes we realize that there's a lot of loss that congregations feel and experience, but I'm wondering about for leaders, how do we internalize loss? How do we internalize disappointments? And how does that impact our ability to be able to have resonance and those type of things?
Wow, that's so important, Sienna. I think that's where the compassion comes in. And some of the compassion is also, I think, compassion about time. That time for us can seem very slow or very fast, but God's time is often different. And so the time it takes to allow some things to kind of move through us, whether it's a disappointment, a loss, a frustration, you know, we're about to get that started and a major giver goes away. And we have a gap that we didn't expect, or, you know, the people that we were really counting on to help us carry this forward have suddenly either gotten distracted or changed their minds. You know, how do we have compassion on ourselves that and to continue to trust that God is at work? And I think that takes both being able to take a time out for ourselves in that sense of loss and grief, give ourselves time and trust that it is falling into place as God is present. Yeah. But that's kind of coming back to that kind of basic faith 101 practices, right? You know, am I reading scripture? Am I praying? And am I meeting with other faithful, you know, am I in some kind of community where I don't have to be the point person? Am I somewhere where people are praying for me, where people are helping me understand how this scripture applies to me? Am I in some kind of worship or prayer or community where I get to receive and not just give? And I think that's where our roots start to really get dry, so that we do get more frustrated or we feel the losses more intensely. Does that speak to that? Yeah. So I can't encourage those of you who are leading regularly enough to get some time to do these other things, whether it's go on a retreat, have a group that you pray with, you know, do spiritual journaling that you share, take that time, because that's what really pays off. Anybody else? Well, I appreciate being with you today, and I appreciate your input and the things you've helped me think about, and I trust and hope this will support you in your ministries and in the work and service you are doing. So let me close us, and as I said, I do have these slides as a handout, and I will email that to Sandana, so those of you who want it can get that from her. So let's close with prayer. I thank you, loving God, for these leaders, for their work, for their faith, for their persistence, for their openness to you and your dream, for their congregation, and for all of us. I'm grateful for the time we've spent together, grateful for where your Spirit has moved, and trust that you will keep each of them in your presence. I pray all of this in the strong name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Well, we just want to say thank you so much, Lori, for being with us today. Andy and some others have written on chat that they're thankful for this conversation. As with all of our conversations around transformation going beyond change, we want these to be conversation starters and ways that we continue to dialogue around these particular principles. There's no formula. If you're looking for someone to put a formula together and to say, this is what's going to work and do it this way, that's not what this is about. There's no formula. We're finding our way together. Our challenges are adaptive, and these principles help us continue to move forward. So thank you so much, Lori, and thank you for sharing the resource. Andy also did some Googling for us to say where we could get the book. We are continuing with our book studies, and so Andy and others, if this is a book that you think would be good for our presbytery to read together, maybe that's something that we do in the future. Lori, blessings and peace upon your ministry. We certainly do appreciate you, and thank you so much for taking time out of your schedules to be a part of this. We've had key commission leaders on our call today. They didn't all identify themselves as those commission chairs, but they are there. Darren Seaman, in particular, is the co-chair for our Transformation and Development Commission, and they're helping us lead this initiative as well as everyone else. So blessings and peace as you continue your day. May God be with you in whatever you're doing. Blessings. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.